Howdy, my name is Jason Marino. Welcome to the PS of Life. Today we're talking a little bit about the phrase, I'm spiritual, not religious. Now, the world has changed a lot. It is very different from the way that it was 40, 50 years ago. The U.S. especially was a very churched community, a country where there was a church on every corner, and people just basically went to church because it was natural, and they brought their kids up in the church, and church. That's the way it was. And many people would say that America was very strongly Christian in many ways. Now, the world is not like that anymore. People do not just automatically go to church because that's the thing to do. They don't necessarily see that God is or isn't true. They just don't really think about that question. And in many ways, to be able to say that a church is growing or thriving is an oddity, it's a rarity. Because having people involved in things, no matter how great the church might be, is not a natural thing. Now, we might be asking questions like, well, then how do we change this? But you see, that question doesn't actually help anything right now. It's not actually going to change anything to try changing church. Instead, it's better to spend some time looking at what it is for us to change ourselves. And when I say that, I don't mean in regards to how do we do church better. What I mean is, how can we be church better? Now, what does that mean? What does that mean to talk about being rather than doing? Now, a lot of people have discussed this over the years, and I definitely want to make sure that I'm emphasizing that I'm not the first to mention this. But the big thing to look at in this regard is to be asking a question of who are we as people, rather than trying to say, how can we do what we did before better? Now, who we are as people has two different aspects. One is the fact that we are physical beings in a physical world. And the second is the fact that we are spiritual beings in a spiritual world. Now, both of those are very important to who we are. Now, before we can go further in anything in our lives, what's important is to be able to ask questions of how are we living out both sides of what this is, the physical and the spiritual, the P and the S. Now, oftentimes we get into ruts and behaviors and ways of doing things, ways of seeing things and thinking about things. We get caught in the old. And oftentimes when we get to the end of the day and we think to ourselves, man, wouldn't it be great if fill in the blank? It becomes like the afterthought, the end of what we were doing before. It's almost like the end of the letter and we have to throw it in at the last minute. But oftentimes the thing that we spend the least amount of time ends up being the vital point that changes our perception, that changes how we move forward, that changes what we do because it changes who we are. So if we start to ask the question of what are the different parts of what it means to be human, what it means to be a person, then we might see that there's an aspect that we've overlooked, something that is integral to who we are that maybe we've been neglecting. So maybe the ending of the letter might be the beginning of a new chapter. This is the PS of life.